Chapter 1. The night everything shifted. The digital clock on Ethan Marsh's nightstand read 11:47 p.m. in harsh red numbers that seemed brighter than usual. Rachel was late. That alone wasn't unusual. She had work dinner sometimes, occasional drinks with friends, last-minute errands. But tonight felt different. He couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the way she'd rushed out earlier, barely kissing him goodbye. Maybe it was the tightness in her voice when she'd said, "Don't wait up." He had waited anyway. The television played softly in the background, some late-night rerun he wasn't really watching. Ethan sat on the couch in sweatpants, one arm stretched across the backrest, his phone resting in his palm. No new messages. He resisted the urge to text her again. He didn't want to be that husband, the suspicious one. Still, his eyes drifted to the front door every few minutes. When the lock finally clicked, the sound felt louder than it should have. Rachel stepped inside quickly, almost cautiously, as if she didn't want to draw attention. She closed the door behind her with unusual care and set her purse down on the entry table. For a split second, she froze when she saw him sitting there. "Oh," she said, forcing a smile. "You're still awake." Ethan muted the television. "Yeah, I figured you'd be home soon." "Work ran late," she replied immediately. Too immediately. "We had a last-minute issue with a client." He nodded slowly. "That sucks." She kicked off her heels and walked toward the kitchen. Her movements were slightly rushed, shoulders tense. Ethan stood up and followed, leaning casually against the counter while she poured herself a glass of water. That was when he noticed it. The scent. It wasn't hers. Rachel usually wore a light floral perfume, soft, familiar, something he associated with mornings and clean laundry. But tonight there was another smell layered over it. Musky, sharp, almost cologne-like. His stomach tightened. "Long night?" he asked gently. "Yeah," she said, not meeting his eyes. She took a long drink of water, then another. "What client was it?" She hesitated, just for a second. But Ethan noticed. The Henderson account," she said. "You know, the one I told you about last week." He frowned slightly. "I thought that meeting was yesterday." Her head snapped up. "What?" "The Henderson thing," he repeated calmly. "You said it was yesterday." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "Ethan, I have more than one meeting with clients. I can't remember every single detail I tell you." He held up a hand. "Hey, I'm just asking." "Well, it feels like you're interrogating me." The word landed heavier than it should have. Interrogating. He blinked, surprised by her defensiveness. "I'm not interrogating you. I was just making conversation." She turned away, busying herself with rinsing the glass, even though it was already clean. Water ran loudly into the sink. "You're being weird," she muttered. Weird. The irony almost made him laugh. Instead, he stayed quiet. After a moment, he stepped closer. "Rachel." She didn't turn around. "You okay?" he asked softly. "I'm fine. You seem stressed." "I had a long day, Ethan." Her tone sharpened. "Not everything is a crisis." He studied her back, the rigid posture, the slight tremor in her shoulders. Something was off. Deeply off. "Did something happen?" he asked. She spun around then, frustration flashing in her eyes. "No, nothing happened. Why do you keep asking like that?" "I'm just trying to understand." "There's nothing to understand," she snapped. "You're imagining things." The words hung between them. Imagining things. Ethan felt a slow, cold sensation settle in his chest. He hadn't accused her of anything. Not directly. But her reaction felt disproportionate, like she was defending herself against a charge he hadn't even made. That realization scared him more than anything else. He took a breath. "All right." She grabbed her purse again. "I'm going to shower." "Okay." She walked past him quickly, disappearing down the hallway. A few seconds later, the bathroom door closed, and the shower turned on almost immediately. Too immediately. Ethan stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty glass in the sink. His mind replayed the evening in fragments. Her hesitation, the unfamiliar scent, the defensiveness, the rushed shower. None of it was proof. But together, it formed a pattern he couldn't ignore. He leaned his hands against the counter, exhaling slowly. "You're overthinking," he told himself. "She's tired. That's all." But another voice, quieter, deeper, whispered something else. "Something isn't right." When Rachel came out of the shower 20 minutes later, wrapped in a towel with damp hair clinging to her shoulders, she acted more normal, calmer, almost affectionate. "You didn't have to wait up," she said softly, walking past him toward the bedroom. "I wanted to see you," he replied. She gave him a small smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. They got into bed without much conversation. She turned off the lamp quickly and rolled on her side, back facing him. "Good night," she murmured. "Good night." The darkness felt heavier than usual. Ethan lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. He could hear the faint rhythm of her breathing beside him, steady and controlled, almost like someone pretending to be asleep. Minutes passed, then an hour. Sleep didn't come. His thoughts moved in slow circles. He trusted Rachel. He had always trusted her. Their marriage had never been dramatic. No screaming fights. No broken promises. They'd built their life on quiet reliability, shared routines, mutual respect, comfort. That foundation wasn't supposed to crack. And yet tonight, something had shifted. Not broken, not shattered, just shifted, like a hairline fracture in glass. Invisible at first glance, but impossible to ignore once you saw it. He turned his head slightly, looking at her silhouette in the darkness. "Rachel," he whispered. No response. Maybe she was asleep. Maybe she was pretending. He didn't ask again. Instead, he lay there, eyes open, listening to the silence between them. For the first time since they'd been married, a thought crept into his mind. Unwanted, unwelcome, but impossible to stop. What if I don't know her as well as I think I do? The question lingered long after midnight. And somewhere in that quiet darkness, Ethan realized something important. Trust didn't usually shatter all at once. Sometimes it started with a feeling, a hesitation, a moment that didn't quite make sense. He didn't have proof. He didn't have answers. But he had instinct, and that instinct was telling him clearly, steadily, that something had changed. Rachel had come home late, smelling unfamiliar and acting defensive. Her explanations didn't add up, but she insisted he was imagining things. Ethan didn't argue loudly. Instead, a quiet unease settled inside him. That night, he lay awake realizing trust had already begun to break, even without proof. Chapter 2. Leaving without a fight. Morning arrived, quietly, almost deceptively peaceful. Sunlight slipped through the bedroom curtains in thin golden lines, stretching across the bed and the wall like nothing had changed. Rachel was still asleep beside him, her face relaxed, hair spread across the pillow in soft waves. To anyone else, it would have looked like a normal morning in a normal marriage. But Ethan hadn't slept. Not really. He had drifted in and out of shallow rest, his mind replaying the previous night over and over until the memories blurred together. Every small detail had grown louder in the silence, the hesitation in her voice, the unfamiliar scent, the defensiveness that didn't match his questions. By the time his alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m., he already knew what he was going to do. He turned it off quickly so it wouldn't wake her. For a few seconds, he just sat there on the edge of the bed, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor. His chest felt tight, but not in an explosive way. It was more like pressure building slowly, steadily, the kind that didn't release with yelling or tears. He stood up quietly and walked to the closet. The familiar routine felt strange now. He pulled out a duffel bag from the top shelf, the same one he used for overnight fire station shifts, and set it on the bed. The zipper sounded louder than it should have. Rachel stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Ethan moved methodically. A few shirts, jeans, underwear, toiletries from the bathroom cabinet, phone charger. Nothing sentimental, nothing permanent, just enough. Each item he packed felt like a small confirmation that this was real, that he was actually leaving. Halfway through, Rachel's voice broke the silence behind him. "What are you doing?" He turned. She was sitting up now, eyes squinting against the morning light, confusion written across her face. Her gaze dropped to the bag, then back to him. "Ethan, what is that?" "I'm going to stay somewhere else for a few days," he said calmly. The confusion turned into alarm almost instantly. "What? What?" He zipped the side pocket before answering. "I just need some space." Her heartbeat seemed to jump in her throat. Space? From what? He met her eyes. From us. The words landed like a physical blow. Rachel pushed the blankets aside and stood up quickly, still wearing her sleep shirt. This is about last night? He didn't respond immediately. That's ridiculous, she said, voice rising. You're seriously doing this because I came home late? It's not just that, he said quietly. Then what is it? She demanded. Because I don't understand what's happening right now. Ethan rested his hands on the bag for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Something feels off, Rachel. Her expression shifted, first confusion, then irritation. Off. That's not a reason to leave your wife. I'm not leaving permanently, he replied. I just need time to think. There's nothing to think about, she said, louder now. You're overreacting. Maybe he was. The thought had crossed his mind a dozen times during the night. But the feeling in his chest wouldn't go away. I might be, he admitted, but I can't ignore it. Rachel stepped closer, her voice trembling. Ignore what? Ethan, nothing happened. I told you that. I know you did. Then why are you acting like I did something wrong? He looked at her for a long moment. Because your reaction didn't match the situation. Because you seemed guilty before I even accused you. Because I don't recognize the way you looked at me last night. But he didn't say any of that. Instead, he said, I'm not accusing you. Then what are you doing? She asked, tears starting to form. I'm listening to my instincts. That answer seemed to scare her more than anything else. Her voice cracked. Your instincts are wrong. Maybe. Ethan, please, she whispered, grabbing his arm. Don't do this. The contact felt familiar, warm, desperate, but something inside him remained still. Usually, when Rachel cried, his immediate reaction was to comfort her, to fix whatever was wrong, to pull her into his arms and promise everything would be okay. Today, he didn't move. That realization hurt more than the situation itself. I'm not trying to hurt you, he said gently. Then don't leave, she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. Just stay. We can talk about it. We are talking. No, you're walking away, she cried. I'm creating distance, he corrected softly. There's a difference? Yes. She stared at him, searching his face for anger, something she could fight against. But there wasn't any. Only calm. And that calm terrified her. Her grip tightened on his arm. Did someone say something to you? Did you hear a rumor or something? Because if this is about... No, he interrupted gently. No one said anything. Then why? She asked again, voice breaking. Why are you doing this to us? He hesitated. Honesty felt complicated right now, but he tried anyway. Because when I look at you, he said quietly, I feel like there's something you're not telling me. Her face went pale. That's not fair, she whispered. Maybe not, he admitted. But it's how I feel. I told you nothing happened. I know. Then believe me. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. But belief wasn't something he could force. I need time, he said. Rachel shook her head, panic rising. Time for what? To convince yourself I'm lying? No. Time to figure out why I feel like this. She let out a shaky breath, tears falling faster now. You're going to regret this. Maybe. Ethan. Her voice softened into a plea. Please don't go. For a moment, silence filled the room. He looked at her, really looked. The woman he had married. The person he'd built his life with. And he realized something painful. Love was still there, but certainty wasn't. He picked up the bag. Rachel's hand slid down his arm as he moved past her. You're really leaving, she said faintly. Just for a few days. That's how it starts, she whispered. He paused near the doorway, turning back one last time. I'm not ending anything right now. Then what are you doing? I'm making sure I don't ignore something important. Her shoulders collapsed slightly, like the fight had drained out of her. I didn't do anything, she said again, softer this time. I hear you. It wasn't the same as believing. He walked down the hallway, grabbed his keys from the table, and opened the front door. The cool morning air hit his face immediately. Behind him, Rachel's quiet crying filled the house. For a second, he almost turned around. Almost. But the unease in his chest stayed. So he stepped outside and closed the door. The next morning, Ethan calmly packed a bag and prepared to leave. Rachel panicked, crying and begging him not to go, insisting nothing happened. Ethan didn't accuse her. He simply said he needed space because something felt wrong. His emotional detachment scared her more than anger would have. He walked out, unsure if he was overreacting but unable to stay. Chapter 3. Searching for Truth. The apartment felt temporary. That was the first thing Ethan noticed when he carried his duffel bag inside. It wasn't a bad place, a small one-bedroom unit rented month to month above a quiet row of shops. Clean, functional, neutral-colored walls, minimal furniture. It had everything he needed and nothing he was emotionally connected to, which was exactly why he'd chosen it. Still, the silence felt louder than it should have. He dropped his bag near the couch and stood there for a moment, hands on his hips, scanning the unfamiliar space. There was no scent of Rachel's perfume, no framed photos, no shared clutter from years of living together. Just stillness. For the first time since leaving the house, doubt crept in. Am I overreacting? He exhaled slowly and sat down. His phone buzzed almost immediately. Rachel, did you get there? He stared at the message. A minute later, another one appeared. Rachel, please tell me you got there safely. He typed back. Ethan, yeah, I'm here. The typing bubble appeared instantly. Rachel, can we talk tonight? He hesitated. Ethan, maybe later. I need some time today. 3 dots again. Rachel, okay, I love you. His chest tightened. He didn't respond. The next few days settled into an uneasy routine. Rachel texted him every morning. Good morning. Did you sleep okay? I miss you. Sometimes she called in the evenings. Sometimes he answered. Sometimes he didn't. When he did pick up, the conversations were strangely normal. How was work, she'd ask. Busy, he'd reply. Did you eat? Yeah. Small talk. Safe topics. No confrontation unless he brought it up, which he rarely did. One night, she said softly, When are you coming home? He paused before answering. I don't know yet. A long silence followed. I didn't do anything, she said again. I know, but knowing and believing were still two different things. A week after he left, Ethan sat across from a man named Mr. Lawson in a quiet office downtown. The decision to meet a lawyer hadn't come from anger. It came from uncertainty. I'm not sure I even want a divorce, Ethan admitted, resting his forearms on his knees. I just need to understand my options. Mr. Lawson nodded calmly. That's more common than you'd think. Ethan glanced around the office. Shelves of legal books, framed certificates, a large window overlooking the street below. What made you consider this? The lawyer asked. Ethan hesitated. There's no proof, he said finally. Just a feeling. Mr. Lawson leaned back slightly. A feeling your spouse may be unfaithful? Ethan nodded once. Has she admitted anything? No. Have you found evidence? No. Then why are you here? The question wasn't judgmental, just direct. Ethan took a breath. Because I don't trust what I'm being told. Mr. Lawson studied him for a moment, then said, Sometimes people come in after discovering an affair. Sometimes they come in because they suspect one. And sometimes they come in because something in the relationship has shifted and they don't know why. That last sentence landed hard. What would you do? Ethan asked quietly. I'm not married to your wife, Mr. Lawson replied gently. But I can tell you this, clarity is better than confusion, even if the clarity hurts. Ethan nodded slowly. They discussed finances, property, timelines, practical things that felt surreal to talk about. Nothing was filed yet, nothing final, but the conversation made something real in his mind. There was a path forward if he needed it. Meanwhile, Rachel's behavior didn't change in any obvious way. She still texted every day. She still said she loved him. She still asked when he was coming home. Once, she sent a photo of their living room with the caption, It feels empty without you here. Another time, I made your favorite pasta tonight. Wish you were here to eat it with me. On the surface, everything looked normal. Too normal. That was what confused him most. If she had something to hide, wouldn't there be signs? Missed calls, strange hours, suspicious behavior. But he didn't see any of that. Instead, he saw consistency, routine, almost effort. One afternoon, he drove past the house after work without planning to. His truck slowed as he approached the street. The lights were on inside. Rachel's car was in the driveway. Curtains open. Everything looked exactly the same as it always had. Domestic. Ordinary. He didn't stop. He kept driving. But his chest felt heavier afterward. The worst part wasn't suspicion. It was doubt about his own judgment. At night, lying alone in the apartment, his mind replayed the same questions. What if she really didn't do anything? What if I'm destroying my marriage over nothing? What kind of husband leaves without proof? But then he'd remember her reaction that night. The defensiveness, the tension, the unfamiliar scent, and the unease would return. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just steady, persistent, like background noise you couldn't turn off. 2 weeks after moving out, Rachel called him late in the evening. Her voice sounded small. "Are you ever coming back?" "I don't know," he said honestly. A pause. "I feel like you've already decided I'm guilty," she whispered. "I haven't." "Then why are you still gone?" He searched for the right words. "Because something doesn't feel right," he said finally. "That's not an answer," she said, frustration creeping in. "It's the only honest one I have." Silence filled the line again. "I love you," she said softly. "I know." But the certainty that used to accompany those words was missing. Days turned into weeks. No proof appeared. No confession came. Nothing dramatic happened. And yet Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that returning home would mean ignoring something important inside himself. One evening, sitting alone on his apartment balcony, watching the sun set behind the buildings, he finally understood something. Truth didn't always reveal itself immediately. Sometimes it stayed hidden beneath the surface. And sometimes the absence of proof didn't mean the absence of a problem. Living alone, Ethan hired a divorce attorney quietly, wanting clarity rather than revenge. He observed Rachel's behavior from afar. She acted normal, texted him, tried to maintain routine. The lack of obvious evidence confused him, making him question himself. Still, his instincts wouldn't let him return. He realized sometimes the absence of truth was its own answer. Chapter 4: The Box of Memories. The knock on Ethan's apartment door came just after 7 in the evening. He wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, he considered ignoring it. He had just gotten home from work, still in a station t-shirt, exhaustion sitting heavy in his shoulders. But the knock came again, softer this time, almost hesitant. Something in his chest tightened. He already knew who it was. When he opened the door, Rachel stood there holding a medium-sized cardboard box against her chest. Her eyes were red, not freshly crying, more like she had been crying on and off for hours. "Hi," she said quietly. Ethan blinked, surprised despite himself. "Rachel, what are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," she replied. Her voice wavered slightly. "Can I come in?" He hesitated only a second before stepping aside. "Yeah, okay." She walked in slowly, looking around the apartment as if taking inventory of his new life. Her gaze lingered on the couch, the kitchen counter, the half-empty bookshelf. "It's nice," she said, though her tone suggested she hated it. "It's temporary," he replied. She nodded, gripping the box tighter. "What's that?" he asked. Instead of answering immediately, she set it carefully on the coffee table. Then she looked at him. "I brought you something." Ethan stepped closer, confusion mixing with curiosity. Rachel opened the flaps of the box. Inside were pieces of their life. Photographs, ticket stubs, cards, small souvenirs from trips. For a moment, Ethan forgot how to breathe. He reached down slowly and picked up the first thing he saw, a photo from their honeymoon. They were standing on a beach, arms wrapped around each other, sunburned and smiling like idiots. "I thought you might want to remember," Rachel said softly. His chest tightened. "I already remember," he said. She swallowed. "Then why does it feel like you're trying to erase us?" "I'm not erasing anything." "It feels like it," she whispered. She pulled out another item, a folded restaurant receipt. "Our first anniversary," she said. "You insisted on ordering the most expensive steak, even though we couldn't afford it." He almost smiled. "You told me we'd be eating ramen for a week after." "We did," she said, a faint laugh escaping through tears. The nostalgia hit him harder than he expected. Memories flooded back. Laughter, late-night conversations, road trips with terrible music playing, lazy Sunday mornings tangled in sheets. For a moment, the tension between them faded. Rachel stepped closer. "Ethan, we've built so much together," she said gently. "You can't just walk away from that." "I'm not walking away from our history," he replied quietly. "Then come home." The words hung in the air. He looked down at the box again. A birthday card he had written her 3 years ago sat on top. He recognized his own handwriting instantly. "You're my favorite person in the world." His throat tightened. Rachel saw the hesitation in his eyes and stepped closer again, her hand lightly touching his arm. "We're stronger than this," she said. "Whatever you think is wrong, we can fix it." He closed his eyes briefly. Part of him wanted to believe her, wanted to accept the memories as proof that nothing could have gone wrong. But another part, quieter, steadier, refused to ignore the unanswered question that had been sitting between them for weeks. He opened his eyes. "Rachel." She looked up at him, hope flickering. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Okay." His voice remained calm, but firm. "Did you cheat on me?" The hope vanished from her expression. Her hand fell from his arm. "What?" she whispered. "Did you cheat on me?" he repeated. Her face shifted, shock first, then hurt, then anger. "No," she said quickly. "Of course not." "Rachel." "I didn't," she insisted louder now. "Why do you keep asking me that?" "Because something doesn't make sense," he said quietly. "You're accusing me again." "I'm asking you." "There's no difference," she snapped. He watched her carefully. Her breathing had quickened. Her shoulders were tense. Her eyes avoided his for a split second before locking back onto his face. It was the same reaction as the first night. Defensive, emotional, but not reassuring. "If nothing happened," he said gently, "then help me understand why I feel like this." "I can't control your feelings," she replied, frustration rising. "I told you the truth." "Then look me in the eye and say it again." "I just did." "Say it calmly." Her mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then she said, more slowly, "I didn't cheat on you." The words were clear, but something underneath them felt off. Ethan exhaled quietly. "I want to believe you," he said. "Then believe me," she pleaded. Tears welled up again. "Why isn't that enough?" "Because trust isn't built on words alone. Because instinct doesn't disappear just because someone denies something. Because your reaction doesn't match your innocence." But he didn't say those thoughts out loud. Instead, he said, "I need honesty more than comfort right now." "I am being honest," she cried. He shook his head slightly. "No," he said softly. "You're trying to fix how I feel." "That's what people do in marriages," she said, voice breaking. "We support each other." "Yes," he agreed, "but we don't manipulate each other." The word hit her hard. "I'm not manipulating you," she whispered. "You brought a box of memories," he said gently. "You're reminding me of everything we've had, instead of answering the one thing I'm asking." Her tears spilled over. "I'm trying to save us," she said. "I know. Then let me." "I can't," he replied quietly. "Not without clarity." Her shoulders sagged. For the first time since she arrived, she looked defeated. "So that's it?" she asked faintly. "You're choosing suspicion over me?" "I'm choosing truth," he said. "And if there's no truth to find, then we'll know that too." She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign he might change his mind. But his expression stayed calm, steady, resolved. Finally, she wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand and nodded weakly. "I don't know how to prove something that didn't happen," she said. "I understand," he replied. Neither of them moved for a few seconds. Then she picked up the box slowly. "You should keep these," she said. He hesitated. "Maybe later." Her face crumpled slightly at that. "Okay," she whispered. She walked toward the door, movements slower than when she arrived. Before opening it, she turned back. "I love you," she said. "I know," he replied. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Rachel visited Ethan with a box filled with photos and mementos from their relationship. She tried to reignite nostalgia, reminding him of their history and love. Ethan almost softened, but he asked directly if she cheated. She denied it again. The moment collapsed. Ethan recognized her emotional manipulation and gently refused reconciliation without honesty. They separated once more, tension unresolved. Chapter 5, The Party and the Kiss. Ethan almost didn't go. The invitation had been sitting in his messages for 3 days, a casual group gathering hosted by one of their mutual friends. Normally, he would have declined without hesitation. Social events felt exhausting lately, and the idea of being around people who knew both him and Rachel made his chest tighten. But staying alone in the apartment night after night wasn't helping either. So, After staring at the message for a long time that afternoon, he finally typed, "Yeah, I'll come by for a bit." Even as he hit send, he wasn't sure it was the right decision. The house was already full when he arrived. Laughter spilled out onto the front porch, mixed with the faint thump of music from inside. Through the windows, he could see groups of people standing around with drinks, talking animatedly. For a moment, he sat in his truck with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. You can still leave, he thought. But then he exhaled, opened the door, and stepped out. Inside, the atmosphere felt warm and familiar. Friends greeted him with casual hugs and shoulder pats. "Hey man, haven't seen you in forever. You doing okay? Good to have you here." He nodded, offering polite smiles, answering questions with neutral responses. "Yeah, I'm good. Just busy with work. Life stuff. No one pressed too hard." And for a little while, he almost relaxed, until he saw her. Rachel stood across the room, near the kitchen island, talking with two friends. She looked exactly the same posture, same expressive hands when she spoke, same soft waves in her hair. But something in Ethan shifted the moment their eyes met. She froze. The conversation around her faded as her attention locked onto him. For a second, neither of them moved. Then she set her drink down and started walking toward him. "Ethan," she said quietly when she reached him, "I didn't know you were coming." "Last-minute decision," he replied. She studied his face carefully, searching for something. "You look tired," she said. "Work's been busy." A small silence settled between them. "I've been texting you," she added softly. "I know. You haven't really answered." I didn't know what to say. Her lips parted slightly, but before she could respond, another voice cut in. "Well, this is unexpected." Naomi, Rachel's best friend, stepped into the space beside them, holding a glass of wine. She wore a calm smile, but her eyes carried something sharper underneath. "Hi, Ethan," she said. "Naomi," he replied with a nod. There was a brief, almost imperceptible tension between the two women. Naomi glanced between them. This party just got more interesting. Rachel shot her a look. "Naomi what?" Naomi said lightly. "We're all adults here." Ethan sensed an undercurrent he didn't understand. But before he could think about it, someone across the room shouted, "Hey, we're starting a game." A group gathered in the living room, pulling chairs into a loose circle. Someone placed an empty bottle on the floor. "Spin the bottle," Ethan muttered. "More like truth or dare," Naomi said with a small smirk. "Come on, it'll be fun." "I don't think," he started, but Rachel grabbed his wrist gently. "Just stay for a bit." Her touch still felt familiar. He sighed. "Okay, for a few minutes." They joined a circle. At first, the game stayed harmless, silly dares, embarrassing truths, laughter filling the room. The atmosphere loosened. People relaxed. Then the bottle spun and landed pointing directly at Ethan. A chorus of cheers erupted. "Oh, Ethan's turn. Truth or dare?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Truth. Too boring," someone protested. "Dare, dare, dare." Naomi leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on him. "I've got one," she said. Rachel stiffened beside him. Naomi's voice remained calm. "I dare you to kiss me." The room erupted in laughter and whistles. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "It's just a game," Naomi said lightly. Rachel's posture went rigid. "Naomi, don't." Before Ethan could respond, Naomi leaned forward and kissed him. It was quick, deliberate, undeniable. The room went silent for half a second, the kind of stunned silence that happens when something crosses an invisible line. Then Rachel exploded. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she shouted, jumping to her feet. Everyone froze. "Rachel," Naomi started calmly. "No," Rachel snapped. "You don't get to act like that's normal. That's my husband." The word husband hung in the air like a contradiction. Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Is he?" Rachel's face flushed with fury. "You kissed him." Naomi took a slow sip of her wine before answering. "Yes," she said. "I did." "How dare you?" Rachel shouted. The room felt charged, electric with tension. Naomi set her glass down carefully. Then she looked directly at Rachel. Her expression shifted, the calm smile fading into something colder. More precise. "The same way you dare to sleep with my husband," Naomi said evenly. The words landed like a bomb. Silence swallowed the room. Rachel's face went white. "What?" someone whispered. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You heard me," she said. "Marcus, my husband, the man you've been sleeping with for months." Gasps spread through the circle. Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came out. "That's not," she started weakly. Naomi laughed softly. "Please don't insult everyone here by lying again." Ethan felt the world tilt slightly. Marcus, Naomi's husband, the unfamiliar scent, the defensiveness, the instinct that wouldn't go away. Everything clicked into place at once. He didn't feel anger. Not immediately. Just clarity. A heavy, undeniable confirmation. Rachel looked at him, panic flooding her eyes. "Ethan, he stood up quietly. The room remained frozen, everyone watching him, waiting for some kind of reaction. But he didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He didn't ask questions. There was nothing left to ask. He walked past Rachel without speaking. "Ethan," she called after him, voice breaking. He didn't stop. He grabbed his jacket from the chair near the door and stepped outside into the cool night air. Behind him, the muffled chaos of voices erupted inside the house. At a gathering with mutual friends, Ethan attended reluctantly. Rachel was there, along with her best friend Naomi. During a game of dares, Naomi suddenly kissed Ethan. Rachel exploded with outrage, accusing both of betrayal. Then Naomi calmly delivered the truth. Rachel had been sleeping with Naomi's husband, Marcus. The room fell silent. Ethan didn't react dramatically. He simply walked away, emotionally finished. Chapter 6, The Final Conversation. The cool night air hit Ethan's face the moment he stepped off the porch. He barely registered the sound of the door behind him or the distant murmur of voices inside the house. His mind felt strangely quiet, not empty, but settled, like a puzzle that had finally snapped into place after weeks of uncertainty. Marcus. The name echoed in his head. Naomi's husband. The unfamiliar scent. The defensive reactions. The instinct he'd tried to ignore. He reached his truck and placed his hand on the door handle. "Ethan." Rachel's voice cut through the night, sharp and desperate. Footsteps pounded across the driveway behind him. He closed his eyes briefly before turning around. Rachel rushed toward him, tears streaming down her face, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. She looked panicked, more panicked than he had ever seen her. "Ethan, wait," she said breathlessly, grabbing his arm. He didn't pull away, but he didn't respond either. Her chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath. "Please, just listen to me." He nodded once. "Okay." That calm response seemed to throw her off. Her voice cracked. "I didn't want you to find out like that." The words hung between them. Find out. Not deny. Not argue. Just acknowledge. A strange sense of confirmation settled deeper inside him. "How long?" he asked quietly. She swallowed. It wasn't like that." "How long, Rachel?" Her eyes dropped to the ground. "A few months," she whispered. The number didn't shock him the way he expected. Instead, it felt like hearing the final piece of information in a report he already understood. He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, tears falling faster. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." The phrase landed flat. A mistake. Months. Those two ideas didn't belong in the same sentence. "You slept with him more than once," Ethan said calmly. Her shoulders shook. "Yes, but that's not a mistake." She flinched. "It just happened," she said weakly. "We were talking, and he was there for me. And I felt lonely because you were always working, and..." He raised a hand slightly. "Rachel." She stopped talking. His voice remained even. "You made a series of choices." Her mouth trembled. I know, and I regret them. I swear I do." "Do you?" "Yes," she cried. "I ended it. I told him it was over." Ethan studied her face carefully. "Before tonight?" he asked. She hesitated. That hesitation was answer enough. Her eyes filled with fresh panic. I just needed time to figure things out." He nodded once more, absorbing the information without visible emotion. "Ethan, please," she said, gripping his jacket. "It didn't mean anything. He doesn't matter to me. You're the one I love." The words might have meant everything a month ago. Now they felt distant, muted. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. I was scared, she admitted. I didn't want to lose you. You already did, he said quietly. Her face crumpled. No, I haven't, she insisted desperately. You're right here. We can fix this. Couples get through worse things all the time. He didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. She searched his face frantically. Say something. He took a slow breath. I filed for divorce, he said. The world seemed to stop. Rachel blinked, confusion replacing panic. What? I filed, he repeated calmly. Last week. Her grip on his jacket loosened, as if the strength drained out of her fingers. You what? She whispered. I wasn't sure before tonight, he continued. But I started the process. Shock spread across her face, followed quickly by fear. You're already planning to leave me? She asked, voice shaking. I was preparing for the possibility. But you didn't even know for sure. I knew enough, he replied. Her head shook rapidly. No, Ethan, you can't do this. We can go to therapy. We can work through it. I'll do anything. The desperation in her voice was raw now. Anything, he asked softly. Yes. Then be honest. I'm being honest. Completely. She hesitated again. The pattern repeated itself. And in that hesitation, Ethan felt something inside him finally settle. Acceptance. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Just clear. There's no path back from this for me, he said gently. Her eyes widened. You don't mean that. I do. You're just hurt right now, she insisted. You're reacting. No, he said calmly. I've had weeks to think. Tears streamed down her face. I love you. I know. That has to count for something. It does, he said. But it doesn't erase what happened. Her voice broke completely. Please don't throw our marriage away over one mistake. He looked at her for a long moment. Our marriage didn't break tonight, he said quietly. It broke when you chose someone else. The words landed harder than any shout could have. Rachel covered her mouth, sobbing. For a second, guilt flickered inside him. But it passed. Because this wasn't cruelty. It was truth. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered through tears. I believe that, he said. Then don't leave me. He shook his head slowly. I already left, he replied. Silence stretched between them, filled only by her crying and the distant hum of traffic from the street. For the first time since this began, Ethan realized something important. He wasn't angry. He wasn't confused. He wasn't searching for answers anymore. He knew, and that knowledge brought a strange kind of peace. Rachel looked up at him, eyes swollen and desperate. Is there really nothing I can do? He paused before answering. No, he said softly. Her shoulders collapsed. The fight drained out of her completely. He stepped back toward his truck. Take care of yourself, he said. She didn't respond. He opened the door and got inside. As he started the engine, he saw her standing there in the headlights, small, broken, crying. For a moment, memories flashed through his mind. Laughter, vacations, shared dreams. But instead of pulling him backward, they felt like chapters that had already ended. Rachel ran after Ethan outside, crying and finally admitting she had made a mistake. She tried to minimize the affair, calling it meaningless. Ethan revealed he had already filed for divorce before that night. Her shock turned to desperation, but his calm certainty showed there was no path back. For the first time, Ethan felt emotional closure beginning. Chapter 7. Court and Consequences. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and faint disinfectant, the kind of sterile, bureaucratic smell that made Ethan feel simultaneously out of place and oddly calm. He had arrived early, giving himself time to sit in the hard chairs of the waiting room, staring at the muted beige walls and the narrow windows that let in a pale winter light. Lawyers in dark suits passed by, murmuring to clients, shuffling papers. Court clerks moved with purpose, stamping documents and whispering behind counters. Ethan's hands rested lightly on his briefcase. He didn't tap his fingers. He didn't fidget. He wasn't nervous. Not really. But there was a hollow feeling in his chest, like the finality of this day was both necessary and unbearable. Mr. Marsh, a court clerk called, her voice crisp and neutral. Yes, he replied, standing. She led him down a narrow corridor lined with doors. Some rooms were closed, others open, revealing people arguing quietly, lawyers gesturing with clipped hands, judges leaning over papers. The world felt small, almost staged, but every step toward the courtroom intensified the quiet tension in his chest. Inside, the room was more imposing than he remembered from the first time he'd visited. Dark wood paneling rose to a high ceiling. The judge sat behind a large desk, reviewing papers. Naomi was already there, seated in the witness section, holding a folder carefully in her lap. Her eyes met his for a moment, and she gave the slightest nod. Rachel wasn't there. Ethan noticed it immediately. There was an absence that rang louder than any angry confrontation could have. The empty chair in her designated spot spoke volumes, louder than any confession, louder than any lie. His lawyer, Mr. Lawson, leaned in slightly. "She's not here," he said quietly. "We'll proceed anyway. We have all the evidence ready." Ethan nodded. He had prepared for this, but that didn't mean the emptiness didn't hit him. The judge called the session to order. Papers shuffled. The clerk announced the case. Rachel's absence was noted officially. "Counselor Marsh," the judge said, looking directly at Ethan's lawyer. "Are you ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mr. Lawson replied. "We will provide testimony and supporting evidence." Naomi stood when called to the stand. Her composure was impeccable, despite the obvious tension in the room. "Please state your name for the record," the clerk said. "Naomi Ellis," she replied clearly. "And your relation to the parties involved?" "I'm Rachel Marsh's best friend. I'm also the wife of Marcus Ellis." The name Marcus echoed in Ethan's mind, even here in the courtroom. He swallowed and let Naomi continue. "Have you observed inappropriate conduct between Rachel Marsh and your husband?" the lawyer asked. Naomi's gaze was steady. "Yes, I have evidence that Rachel and Marcus were involved in an affair over the past several months." She handed over a folder to the lawyer, who reviewed it and submitted it to the judge. Inside were text messages, photographs, and other documentation that clearly corroborated Naomi's testimony. The judge scanned the papers quickly, raising an eyebrow. "And you have personal knowledge of these events?" "Yes, Your Honor," Naomi replied. The room was quiet. The air seemed to thicken. Ethan sat in his seat, his hands resting lightly on his knees, watching her deliver the facts without embellishment or emotion. Her calm precision contrasted sharply with Rachel's absence. Questions were asked by the opposing side, but Naomi remained firm. Her voice never wavered. Ethan felt a deep respect for her in that moment, not just for her honesty, but for her courage. By the time the judge banged the gavel and turned his attention to the settlement, Ethan felt detached, almost floating outside of the experience. Given the testimony and evidence provided, the judge said slowly, "And in light of the absence of the respondent, this court grants Mr. Ethan Marsh full divorce, including ownership of the marital residence, all jointly held assets, and the finalization of the divorce agreement as submitted." Ethan's stomach tightened. Relief? Maybe, but it was strange, a muted, hollow relief. The papers were stamped, signed, and handed to him. The finality of it pressed into his hands like a weight he had anticipated but not truly understood. Rachel had already emotionally moved on. That realization hit him harder than her betrayal had. The court had recognized him as the wrong party. He had won. Everything that should have felt victorious instead felt empty. Naomi slid into the seat beside him once the judge adjourned the session. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He nodded slowly, staring at the floor for a moment. "I don't know if anyone ever feels okay after something like this," he said quietly. "I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, there was numbness. Silence. Completion without celebration." "I know," she said. "It's strange. Winning feels like losing sometimes." He glanced at her, appreciating the shared understanding. She didn't offer platitudes. She didn't try to explain it away. She just acknowledged it. They stood and walked toward the exit. The winter sunlight had faded, replaced by the pale glow of streetlights. Cars passed by lazily. People were going about their ordinary lives, unaware of the emotional weight carried by the two of them. Ethan held the folder with the finalized divorce papers in his hand. The texture of the paper, the crisp, cold surface, was oddly comforting and alien at the same time. As he stepped into the street, The thought hit him. Closure doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is numb. Sometimes it simply exists as a confirmation that a chapter is over. Rachel's absence had spoken louder than any confrontation could. It confirmed what Ethan had already suspected. She had emotionally moved on. Her betrayal was now backed by her indifference. And in that truth, Ethan felt something he hadn't in months. A strange, bittersweet freedom. He exhaled, letting the cold air fill his lungs, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, and realizing that life, messy, painful, and unpredictable, would continue. Naomi gave him a small, supportive smile. "Do you want to go get a coffee?" He shook his head slowly. "Not yet. I need a moment." She nodded, understanding. Words weren't necessary here. Ethan walked away from the courthouse, the folder clutched in his hand, feeling neither victorious nor defeated. Just done. The legal battle was over. The settlement secured. The divorce finalized. And yet, the emptiness in his chest confirmed a truth more profound than any courtroom judgment. Closure sometimes feels empty rather than victorious. Chapter 8. Naomi's Visit. Ethan was sitting on the balcony of his apartment when a knock came. The evening was quiet, a faint breeze rustling the leaves of the trees lining the street below. He wasn't expecting anyone, but when he glanced at the door, he saw Naomi standing there, coat wrapped tightly around her, her expression cautious yet determined. "Hi," she said softly, almost shyly. "Naomi," he replied, standing to open the door. "Come in." She stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. There was a pause, an almost awkward silence, as if neither knew how to begin. Naomi set her handbag down carefully on the couch and smoothed her coat. "I thought I should check in," she said finally. "After everything." Ethan nodded. "I appreciate that." He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Sit." She lowered herself onto the cushion, hands folded in her lap. Ethan sat opposite her, leaning back slightly, arms resting on the chair's arms. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and the lingering scent of his cologne from the morning. It was neutral calm, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past few weeks. Naomi studied him for a moment. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry for what happened," she said. "All of it. For you, for me, for the way Rachel hurt both of us." He didn't flinch at the words. "Thank you," he said quietly. "It helps to hear it from someone who understands." Her eyes softened. "You understand too, I think. The way she lied, the way she betrayed both of us. It's like we were collateral damage in her choices." Ethan exhaled slowly. "It felt that way. I kept asking myself, how could someone I loved so much behave like that?" Naomi nodded, her fingers twisting slightly in her lap. "I asked the same thing. And yet here we are. Both of us hurt, both of us aware now." He considered her carefully. "Are you okay?" She shrugged, a small, bitter smile appearing. "I'll survive. But it's complicated. Rachel, she's already moved on. Openly dating him now." The words landed, but there was no shock, no flinch from Ethan. He merely nodded, taking a sip from the cup of water on the table. The calm detachment surprised even him. "Does it bother you?" Naomi asked, her voice low. He shook his head slowly. "Not in the way you think. I'm not angry. Not anymore. It's disappointing, yes. But I don't feel the need to fight her for attention or revenge. That chapter's closed." She tilted her head, studying him. "You're calm. I expected more fire, more pain. You seem composed." "I've spent weeks processing it," he said. "And there's a difference between feeling hurt and letting it control your life. I won't give her that power anymore." Naomi's lips pressed into a thin line, as if weighing his words carefully. "It's strange," she said. "We both lost trust in people we thought we could rely on, and yet here we are, talking not as adversaries, but as survivors." Ethan allowed a small smile. "Survivors. That's one way to put it." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the distant hum of traffic outside, the occasional sound of a neighbor's dog barking. The quiet was almost comforting, a stark contrast to the tension of the courtroom and the emotional chaos of the past weeks. Naomi leaned forward slightly. "I wanted to ask you something. There's a gathering this weekend. Just a small one. Friends, drinks, casual. I thought maybe you could come. Not as anything romantic, just support. Company. Someone who understands. Ethan considered the invitation. He wasn't sure what the idea of socializing after everything even meant anymore. But Naomi's presence, calm, honest, and unafraid, made the idea less intimidating. Maybe, he said slowly, I think I could use the distraction. And company, yes. She smiled faintly. Relief softened her features. Good. No pressure. Just if you feel up to it. He nodded. Thank you. I appreciate it. Naomi leaned back in her chair, relaxing slightly. I guess it's the first time we can talk openly. Really openly. About everything that happened. No secrets. No lies. No pretending. Ethan met her gaze. It's a relief. Painful, but necessary. I needed to hear it from someone who saw the other side. She gave a small, humorless laugh. I guess that's me. The witness, the victim, maybe even the messenger. You were all those things, he said. And somehow here we are, talking, still human. The words hung in the air, carrying a strange weight, acknowledgement, understanding, and a subtle bond forming. For the first time since the betrayal, Ethan felt a sense of calm. Not joy, not closure completely, but a quiet acceptance of reality. Naomi's voice softened. I don't want to drag you into my life unnecessarily. I just thought we could be honest with each other, and maybe start to heal. I'd like that, he admitted. Talking like this helps. It's easier than being alone with my thoughts. She smiled, the faintest warmth touching her eyes. Me too. It's comforting to not have to pretend everything's fine when it isn't. They fell into a companionable silence, punctuated only by small sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, a car passing by, the occasional creak of the building settling. There was no awkwardness, no forced conversation, just quiet acknowledgement of shared experiences and mutual understanding. Naomi glanced at him again. You're handling all of this better than I expected, but don't pretend it doesn't sting. It will sometimes. That's normal. Ethan nodded. I know. I feel it. But I also know I won't let it define me. I've got to move forward. And maybe that starts with learning to trust carefully the right people again. She nodded slowly, understanding more in his words than he realized. The right people, she repeated. I like that. Maybe we can be part of each other's right people, at least for now. Not rushing anything, just support. Support, he echoed. And this time the word felt heavier, more tangible. Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out her coat, adjusting it before standing. I should go soon. Just want to check in and offer the invitation. No pressure, remember. He stood as well, walking her to the door. Thank you, he said again, for coming, for honesty, for being here. Of course, she said. We've both been through a lot. It's nice to share it with someone who gets it. They paused for a moment at the doorway, an unspoken understanding passing between them. See you this weekend? Naomi asked softly. Maybe, he replied, managing a faint smile. I'll let you know. She nodded, stepping outside, the chill of the evening brushing against her face. Ethan closed the door behind her, leaning against it for a moment, letting out a long breath. He returned to the living room, sinking onto the couch, and allowed himself to simply exist in the quiet. For the first time in weeks, the tension inside him had eased, replaced by a strange, peaceful companionship, not romantic, not forced, just mutual acknowledgement of the pain they had endured and the understanding they could share. Naomi's visit had left him with something he hadn't expected, a quiet, tentative connection, a friendship born from shared betrayal, honest conversation, and the realization that moving forward didn't mean moving alone. For the first time, he felt a subtle but significant shift in his emotional landscape. There was no anger, no desire for revenge, just calm, careful acceptance. And with that, a seed of trust, cautious, fragile, but present, began to take root. Naomi had invited him to attend another social gathering together, not romantically, just as support. A quiet friendship began forming between them. Chapter 9, Public Collapse. The car ride to the party was quiet. Naomi drove, her hands steady on the wheel, her eyes occasionally glancing at Ethan. who sat silently in the passenger seat. Neither spoke much, there was no need. The understanding between them was unspoken, formed over weeks of shared pain and quiet honesty. When they arrived, the neighborhood street was alive with music, laughter, and the hum of conversation spilling from a large house decorated with strings of soft white lights. Ethan stepped out first, taking in the scene with a measured attachment. He had attended parties before, but tonight felt different. Tonight, he was an observer, not a participant. Naomi followed, carrying a bottle of wine for the host. She offered a brief, encouraging smile. "Let's just stay calm," she said quietly. "We're here for ourselves, not to watch her spiral. But you'll see soon enough." Ethan nodded. His stomach didn't churn with anticipation or anger. It felt empty in a way that was oddly liberating. As they entered the living room, he spotted them immediately. Rachel and Marcus. They were standing close together near the center of the room, laughing in a way that looked rehearsed, their hands brushing occasionally. The sight didn't provoke jealousy, nor did it sting. He simply observed. Naomi leaned slightly toward him, whispering, "See that? That's the new reality. She's already moved on. But watch." They mingled for a while, exchanging polite greetings with acquaintances, sipping drinks, laughing softly at small jokes. Ethan kept his attention loosely on Rachel and Marcus, noting the subtle signs he had learned to read. Her fidgeting, Marcus checking his phone constantly, her attempts at exaggerated laughter. Then it started. A comment, offhand, from Marcus about someone at the party, something minor, a joke that didn't land. Rachel's face flushed, and her voice rose just enough to catch the attention of nearby guests. "You always do that," she exclaimed, stepping closer to him. "You never listen, Marcus. You just ignore me." Marcus's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about? I was just joking." "You're always joking," she snapped. "You don't take anything seriously. Nothing matters to you." Ethan watched, leaning back slightly against the wall. Naomi's hand brushed lightly against his arm. "They're unraveling," she murmured. The argument escalated. Rachel's words became sharper, Marcus's responses defensive. The crowd slowly shifted, forming a loose circle around them, intrigued by the rising tension. "You think you can just lie and cheat, and everything will be fine?" Rachel shouted, pointing a trembling finger at him. At Marcus, not Ethan. "Rachel, calm down." Marcus raised his voice, finally losing his composure. "I'm tired of this drama. I didn't sign up for this tonight." "Drama? Drama is pretending you love someone while sneaking around with my best friend." Rachel screamed, the volume echoing through the room. Guests murmured, some looking shocked, others curious. Ethan remained quiet, hands resting at his sides. His chest was steady, his face calm. He wasn't enjoying this. He wasn't cheering. But there was a sense of inevitability in the way the confrontation unfolded. Marcus's patience snapped completely. "I'm done," he yelled, spinning on his heel and storming out of the room. Gasps filled the circle of onlookers. Rachel's mouth opened, her voice catching as she realized he was gone. She looked around, suddenly aware that all eyes were on her anger, her shouting, her isolation. Ethan's gaze softened, though his expression remained neutral. He could see the humiliation etched across her face, the collapse of the facade she had tried to maintain. Her hands shook slightly, her posture drooping. She was no longer in control. She was alone in the consequences of her choices. Naomi's voice broke the silence beside him. "Sometimes people don't need revenge. Sometimes consequences happen on their own." He nodded slowly. "Yeah." Rachel's face twisted in confusion, anger, and panic all at once. She opened her mouth, searching for words, then closed it again. Guests murmured quietly among themselves. Some shifted awkwardly, others tried to pretend they hadn't seen the outburst, but the moment had already been imprinted in everyone's minds. Naomi's hand brushed his arm again. "She's alone," she said softly. "All by herself." Ethan exhaled quietly, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel glee. He felt closure. Observing this wasn't a victory, but it was confirmation. "Do you want to stay?" Naomi asked. He shook his head. "No." I've seen what I needed to see." Together, they stepped away from the scene, blending into the background, letting the murmurs and whispers of the guests fade behind them. Ethan's heart felt lighter, not because of schadenfreude, but because he realized he didn't need to act for justice to occur. Life had its own way of revealing truth, of letting people face the outcomes of their choices. As they reached the quiet of the backyard, away from the crowd, Naomi leaned on the railing, taking a deep breath. "It's over," she said. "For her, yes," Ethan replied. "For me, it's just another step." Naomi glanced at him, a faint smile appearing on her lips. "I think you're finally free, Ethan. Not angry, not hurt, just free." He nodded. "I think so too. Watching it happen like that, it's strange. There's no satisfaction in revenge. Only understanding. Closure." They stood together silently, listening to the faint music from inside the house, the occasional laughter and chatter from the party. The scene they had witnessed, Rachel's unraveling, Marcus walking away, the humiliation laid bare, was not something Ethan celebrated. It was simply natural consequence. Ethan looked up at the sky. The stars were faint behind the city lights, but the night felt calm. For the first time in a long time, he felt untethered from the weight of betrayal, from the emotional chaos that had defined the last several months. Naomi's presence beside him was grounding. Not romantic, not forceful, just supportive. It was a reminder that trust, once broken with some, could still exist with others. That bonds could be rebuilt carefully, honestly, without pretense. He exhaled again, feeling the tension that had clung to him for weeks finally release. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need confrontation. He only needed truth, honesty, and the quiet, inevitable consequences that life could bring on its own. The party inside continued, unaware of the shift that had taken place in the lives of those at its center. Guests laughed, music played, and the night went on. Outside, Ethan and Naomi stood together, silent witnesses to the collapse, neither celebrating nor gloating. Ethan felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't victory. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't even closure in the dramatic sense. It was something quieter, steadier, a calm understanding that the betrayal had run its course, that Rachel's choices had consequences, and that he was no longer tied to the storm she had created. He glanced at Naomi, who met his gaze and gave the faintest nod. No word were necessary. They both knew what had happened, what had been witnessed, and how it had changed everything. The weight of the past months, the lies, the suspicion, the betrayal, had finally lifted, leaving only clarity. Rachel had faced the natural consequences of her actions. Ethan had found the closure he didn't need to force. And in that quiet acknowledgement, the two of them began to step forward, free from the chaos that had defined the last year. Ethan realized, fully and finally, that revenge isn't necessary when consequences happen naturally. Chapter 10, 3 years later. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the blinds, casting warm stripes across the hardwood floors of Ethan's apartment. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, blending with the faint aroma of toast and freshly baked bread. From a bedroom, Naomi's voice floated into the living room. "Ethan, did you move the sugar again?" she called, half teasing, half serious. He chuckled quietly, walking in from the kitchen with a mug of coffee in hand. "Maybe, or maybe it's hiding from you." She laughed, the sound light and effortless, coming out from behind the couch where she was bent over a small stack of papers. "You're impossible." He set the mug down on the table and sat across from her. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the kind of quiet, comfortable gaze that only comes after years of trust, after scars have healed, after the chaos of past heartbreak has finally faded into memory. 3 years. It had been 3 years since the courtroom. 3 years since Rachel and Marcus had imploded publicly. 3 years since Ethan had felt the hollow ache of betrayal and the strange numbness that followed legal closure. Those months had been dark, filled with late nights, restless thoughts, and endless questions. But the passage of time had softened those sharp edges. Naomi looked up from the papers, smiling softly. "We should really do something about these bills," she said, but her tone wasn't nagging. It was gentle, almost playful. I know, Ethan said with a small shrug, leaning back. I'll take care of it later. Right now, I'm enjoying this moment of peace. She reached across the table and nudged his hand. You've earned it. The apartment reflected the life they had built together, simple, intentional, calm. Minimalist furniture, a few plants on the windowsill, photographs of quiet vacations, and happy gatherings hung carefully on the walls. Nothing flashy, nothing ostentatious, just a home. Their home, a place where both could breathe without fear, where the shadows of betrayal no longer lingered. Ethan glanced around and felt a warmth that had once seemed impossible. He remembered nights of lying awake alone, thinking about Rachel's lies, about the subtle betrayal, about trust that had cracked and splintered in ways words could not fully capture. And yet here he was now, a life rebuilt, not on vengeance or anger, but on honesty, patience, and slow-growing affection. Naomi set the papers aside and moved closer to him. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? She asked quietly. Sometimes, Ethan admitted. I think about it, but not with regret anymore. It's more perspective. I can see that the pain I went through led me here. To this. To you. To us. Her hand rested on his arm. I feel the same. If things hadn't gone wrong, if Rachel hadn't, her voice trailed off. You mean if she hadn't betrayed both of us? Ethan finished gently. Yes, she said, a small, rueful smile forming. Then maybe we wouldn't have noticed each other. Or maybe we'd never have built this kind of trust. Ethan's lips curved in a subtle smile. Some endings aren't losses. They're rescues. Naomi leaned back, letting out a soft laugh. That's very poetic of you, Ethan. Did you rehearse that line? No, he said lightly, though inside, he felt the weight of the truth behind the words. It just feels like the right one. The morning continued in its quiet rhythm. Naomi moved to the kitchen to refill her coffee, while Ethan grabbed a small notebook from the side table. He scribbled notes, ideas for work, reminders for bills, a list of things to fix around the apartment, small, mundane things that no longer felt heavy or overwhelming. The simplicity of life now was grounding. It was a balm to the years of chaos. Want to take a walk later? Naomi asked, returning with her mug. The weather's perfect. A little sun, some fresh air. I'd like that, he said, smiling genuinely. We haven't done that in a while. They spent the morning in quiet companionship, sharing coffee, reading, exchanging occasional jokes and observations. There was no need for dramatic confessions or reminders of past pain. Their conversation flowed naturally, interspersed with comfortable silences, silences that were no longer tense or anxious, but full of peace. At some point, Naomi glanced at him, her expression softening. You've changed, Ethan. You are lighter. Not because the past is gone, but because you're not carrying it anymore. He considered her words, tracing the rim of his coffee mug with his finger. It took a long time. I had to face the betrayal, accept what happened, and then decide what mattered going forward. Anger and resentment didn't help anyone. Not Rachel, not me, not even Naomi. Her eyes met his, a quiet gratitude shining in them. I'm glad you're here. With me. Not just physically, but emotionally. Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand gently. I'm glad too. We both had to heal. We both had to learn how to trust again. And now, I think we're ready for something steady. Something real. The day passed like that, calm, measured, unhurried. They went for a walk along the nearby river, watching the sunlight dance on the water. They spoke of light things, plans for the weekend, friends, a small garden Naomi wanted to start on the balcony. Yet underneath the mundane topics was a quiet acknowledgement of everything they had survived. At one point, Naomi paused, looking at the river. Do you ever think about Rachel? She asked quietly. Ethan shook his head. Not really. Sometimes I remember the betrayal, but I don't dwell on her. She's part of the past, a chapter one learned from, but it doesn't live with me anymore. Naomi nodded, understanding. That's how it should be. They walked a little further, then sat on a bench by the water, letting the sun warm their faces. Ethan felt the years of tension, betrayal, and uncertainty melt away in the quiet presence of someone who had shared his pain and walked beside him toward healing. "I never thought I'd feel this peace again," he said softly. Naomi's fingers intertwined with his. "Neither did I, but we made it." Slowly, carefully, honestly. Ethan smiled. "Exactly. There's no rush, no drama, just life together day by day." And in that moment, the simplicity of their life, the quiet joy of shared routines, and the emotional safety they had built felt more valuable than any dramatic resolution or vengeful triumph. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy him had, paradoxically, led him to a life far better than he could have imagined. He looked at Naomi, at the warmth in her eyes, the calm in her expression, the trust between them, and felt a profound sense of contentment. Some endings, he realized fully, are not losses. Some endings are rescues. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt that he had truly arrived at one.